This is the other wood that I have. It's actually called Appearance Grade C. Notice the straight grain in it? Maybe there's something you don't notice, or you notice it, but you don't see. There are no knots. Appearance grade. It means it looks good. I don't know exactly how wood is graded, but you can see the difference. This is wood purchased on purpose for something that looks nice. And so this is going to be less rustic. But it's also going to have way less character because, well, this wood is going to be easy to deal with, and it won't have been cut improperly on the edge. It's not bowed, cupped, or anything else. So, yeah, switching over to that. If I didn't have this on hand, I would have kept working with this. But I do have it. So that's what I'm going to do. All right. I have the good wood cut to length. Next, I'm going to need to rip it to the final width of 5 inches each, 5 inches across. It's all 5.5. And I picked the boards out specifically that didn't have crown, which is when the board is bent like this in the plane of the board. And if you've seen it in other videos that I did, I made a jig for cutting, crowned boards, cutting the curved edge off. I don't think I'm going to have to use that, but I might. But what I am going to do is, if you look straight down the board with your eyes, you can see whether there is any curve to it or not. Your eye is a very good judge of a straight line. Any deviation from straight, and you can tell. So I'm going to go through those now. I'm not going to do that on camera, but I'm going to do that for each one of these. And if there is any slight curve to them, I'm going to make a cut. I'm going to cut the curve off first, and then cut it to final size. Turns out there's a little bit of crown in some of the pieces. And before, I might have just gone ahead and worked with them because it's not really very bad at all. But since I could see it, and I am having to rip these down to a narrower size anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take out the small amount of crown and then rip it to final size. I've used sticky notes to show the side that's actually concave. That's the side I'm going to cut off, to just cut the crown off, just trim a slight bit. And on these other pieces, actually these two pieces I am going to use as is, because I'm going to be ripping them into a couple of narrow pieces for the very bottom of the chest, where it's going to have the legs. It's going to only be 2 inches wide, and also the lid is just going to be 2 inches wide. And at that point, by the time I cut them down like that, who knows what's going to happen anyway. They can kind of change shape after cutting. Residual stresses in the wood can do that to you sometimes. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Well, it turns out that I need to do some more adjusting on my table saw. My my rip fence is loose. So you got to make sure it lines up properly in parallel, and it just might. No, it's not. I can even feel it. It needs to line up with this miter gauge slot. And amazingly, I have the instructions that came with my table saw. I always save every booklet with every tool I get. Sometimes you're actually able to get parts to repair them, for one thing. But another, on something like this, there's adjustments that need to be made. Like I had mentioned before, that the blade was off a vertical, and everything's set up to where you can adjust it and make sure it's right, because it never stays the same. And this says to position the fence, line it up there. If it's not straight with it, loosen these, lock it down, loosen these 2 bolts, adjust it at the back, and then tighten the bolts. And that's what I'm going to do. Here is the jig piece of tooling for removing crown from boards. It provides a straight edge to go against the rip fence and holds the board in place that you can cut off the crowned edge. So I'm going to set it up right now where there's not much crown in it, so I am just going to kind of bump it up against where there's interference with the blade. And that's how I'm going to take off that amount. Go ahead and clamp it. Looks like this one needs of course, this one's going to need a little bit of adjusting. That board is straight. Let's see, there we go. You can see it on there. Okay, now all the pieces have had one edge cut straight on them, and now I've readjusted the blade to 5-inch width, but I'm going to do a test cut on a piece first to double check, because you always do that. Actually a skosh over. So I'm going to do a slight, even hardly, since I've adjusted the fence, it's a lot stiffer now. You have to adjust it again later. I think that was exactly one skosh. Yes, there we go. Now, time to rip all the boards to 5-inch width. Next step, I have sorted the boards where they have similar grain patterns, because I have two different types of looking boards mostly, and I've also put them together so that the gaps between them are minimal, even though I theoretically straightened the edges. Table saws aren't known for making perfect good straight edges. That's what jointers are for, which I don't have one. Well, I do have one, but I don't know how to use it very well. And I also matched that up to have the bad side, or the worst looking side, is up, and that's where I'm going to drill and join them with pocket hole screws. I also made sure and had one edge be where it was, what do you want to call it, a factory edge. It hasn't been cut by the table saw. It was that way so it has a nice clean edge to have up, because that'll be where the opening, the top of the chest will be. And one other thing, I'm going to mark these. I'm going to do it lightly. It is going to be on the inside, so it won't show, but lightly mark it with a pencil so I can see where they match up, because I am going to have to move them. There. Now, especially on pine, you don't want to, if you were going to have to mark it on the outside, you mark very lightly, because pencil, you may think you can just sand it right off, but sometimes you make an indentation on the softer portions of the, I mean, if you sit here and make a really hard mark, these softer portions of the grain will get an indentation. I mean, even if you did get the pencil, you know, the graphite out of the, you've got an indentation there, and it's going to show up. So anyway, just something to be wary of. Now I've sorted and arranged all the boards for the sides of the chest. Ready to move on to the next step, which is joining them.